Hi, welcome to this evening's Mansfield Dialogue. We're truly honored to host one of the giants in American news coverage, Sam Donaldson.
And before we go any further, it's appropriate to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. We honor the path they have always shown us in caring for this place for the generations to come.
My name is Gwen Florio, and I'll introduce my co-moderator, Maritsa Georgiou. She's a national correspondent for Newsy after years as an anchor at NBC Montana, where she specialized in COVID-19, politics, and wildfire coverage. She's most widely known for her reporting on the planned removal of U.S. Postal Service blue collection boxes before the 2020 election, which earned her the 2021 Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Television Political Journalism. The Montana Broadcasters Association awarded her the 2019 E.B. Craney Award for Television Broadcaster of the Year. Maritsa grew up in Minneapolis, where her late grandfather still holds a Nielsen ratings record for a local weather forecast. She lives in Missoula with her husband, their son, and 2 rotten dogs. The dogs will be filing a libel suit when we're done tonight.
Yeah, hopefully you won't hear them. And I'd love to introduce Gwen Florio. I'm thrilled to moderate this with her. She retired in 2020 as editor of the Missoulian. Her 4 decades in journalism also included stints as a staff writer and editor for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Denver Post, and Rocky Mountain News, as well as teaching courses in the University of Montana's journalism program. She covered stories ranging from the Oklahoma City bombing trials and the mass shooting at Columbine High School to the glitz of the Miss America pageant and the more practical Miss Navajo contest, whose participants slaughter a sheep. I want to hear about that later. She's reported from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia, as well as Lost Springs, Wyoming, population 3. Her award-winning journalism led to a federal investigation on the handling of sexual assault cases, and as part of a Missoulian team to new laws in Montana designed to protect at-risk teens in private for-profit programs. Her 10th and 11th novels are due out in September and December, and she lives in Missoula with her partner, Scott, and an intermittently good boy named Arlo.
Before we begin tonight, I'd like to remind you to please mute your microphone. While we've integrated previously submitted questions into the conversation, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A rather than the chat box. Thanks.
Yeah, we will be monitoring that through this event. So if you have anything that comes up, just post them there. And established by an act of Congress in 1983, the Mansfield Center is dedicated to fostering globally minded leaders of integrity. The center builds upon Senator Mansfield's legacy of statesmanship, ethical leadership, and bipartisanship to help address the challenges our world faces today. Our work fosters a national dialogue of respect and civility to restore trust in our founding documents, leaders, and national institutions.
America's free press is among the most important of those institutions, and few journalists today have a greater perspective on that than tonight's guest. Sam Donaldson spent his career in broadcast journalism, a medium whose importance was underscored by Mike Mansfield in a 1974 speech to the National Association of Broadcasters in Houston, Texas.
Broadcasting, said Mansfield, exposes vast numbers of people to conditions of life throughout the world and the separate and common problems of nations. It puts information and ideas into millions of human minds, much as data is fed into computers. The consequence of this immense activity is beyond specific comprehension. There is not the slightest doubt, however, that a profound influence is at work, end quote. And now profound changes are at work in journalism, changes that Sam Donaldson observed during his half century in the field.
If you watch TV news at any point between 1961 and 2013, he likely needs no introduction. Sam Donaldson is a native of New Mexico. He was born on March 11, 1934, and was raised on a cotton farm in Doña Ana County. He's a high school graduate of New Mexico Military Institute and received a BA from Texas Western College, now the University of Texas, El Paso. He served 2.5 years on active duty in the U.S. Army and achieved the rank of captain in the U.S. Army Reserve. In 1958, he observed the test of an atomic warhead in Nevada, which had an explosive yield equal to those dropped by the United States during World War II on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan.
Donaldson was a news reporter based in Washington from 1961 to 2013 and was employed most of that time by ABC News. He covered every presidential election during that time, beginning in 1964 with the campaign of Barry Goldwater. He covered the war in Vietnam and the first Gulf War. He was an on-the-scene observer of the shooting of President Reagan in March of 1981. He was ABC's Watergate correspondent, was twice chief White House correspondent, covering Presidents Carter, Reagan, and Clinton, and also co-anchored several news programs with the likes of Diane Sawyer and Cokie Roberts.
His awards include 4 Emmys, 2 Peabody Awards, and the Edward R. Murrow Award. Donaldson now lives in Albuquerque with his wife, Sandra.
Okay, so Sam, it's time to unmute. And before we dive into our topic on the importance of media and democracy, I just wanted to share some personal stories that we've exchanged. You were good friends with my late grandfather. And when I reached out to you to see if you'd be willing to do this, you shared some really incredible stories of Mike Mansfield. And I was wondering if you would be willing to share those memories with our audience tonight.
Well, I'm delighted to be with you, Maritsa and Gwen and everybody else who's there. But I'm tired having listened to all. Did I do all that stuff you said? I mean, I got it down. But it was a great life, and I enjoyed it thoroughly, as well as finally thought I might be doing something that was helpful to people if I got the facts straight, and always tried to, along with other reporters of my day. And as far as your grandfather was concerned, what a guy. Now, you talk about an award as a weatherman. Yes, when I met him, I think he was a weatherman in Washington, D.C., but he was such more than that. He learned the names of and was good friends with everybody in the business. The news business, people like me, Tom Brokaw, all the rest, Stiller, the entertainers. I mean, it's like Barry Savan. Oh, yes, everybody knows him. Does he know us? Well, I'm delighted to be here for that reason and because you invited me. So shoot, you want a Mike Mansfield story?
Yes.
When I got to Washington 2 weeks after John F. Kennedy was inaugurated, I began to work for the local CBS station, which was then owned by the Washington Post. But because it thought it was a national organization, and people were still confused as to, well, who was the network reporter and who was the local reporter, I got to cover the Senate, the House, once in a while, the White House, although I never had any courage to ask the president a question. I sat there and watched. The one with courages were 2 women. May Craig was one of them, and Sarah McClendon. I mean, they were fierce. And then Helen Thomas came along. And finally, I learned from them how to do it. But as I was doing all of this, the Senate was my favorite. And I got to know Mike Mansfield, who had taken the leadership, of course, when the whirlwind of a Lyndon Johnson was doomed to what he said was the consignment of vice president sitting there brooding over the fact he was no longer calling the shots. But I think Mike was exactly the right kind of guy. He knew how to bring people together. The Senate did that in those days. They contended, they argued, Republicans, Democrats, the Southerners, of course, the Northerners. But finally, they made deals that moved the nation forward. No one had to win it all. Everyone understood that negotiation was, you get some, I get some. We leave $15 on the table for the third guy to get bus fare home because we took his car from him, did the deal, and it worked that way. But the last time I talked to Mike Mansfield was in the mid-90s. Now, he was a man of very few words. You know, he could give a talk and it was worth listening to, but he was not a great Churchill orator, and he was sparing in his words. I called him up. He, as you know, had been ambassador to Japan after he left the Senate and other important posts, but he was in his 90s, but he still came down on occasion when he was in Washington to a law office. And I called him up and he took the call because I guess he was lonely. I mean, when you're in the majority leadership of the Senate, you have 5,000 reporters wanting to talk to you. When you left it and you're 95 or 96, 2 guys call and you say, yes, hello, Sam, I remember you. I said, Senator, I'm told that you were one of the people that John Kennedy told that when he was reelected, and he thought he would be, and I think he would have been had he lived, he was going to withdraw from Vietnam, that it was a losing game for us and we didn't belong there and he was going to get out. Said, I can't do it before I'm reelected because most of the country wants to fight those dirty commies wherever you can find them, under your bed, in the closet, on the other side, and what have you. And it's not something I could do. Then, Senator, did he tell you that? And Mike said, yep, he did. Well, Senator, can I bring a camera down and do can I record an interview with you and we can talk about that? I said, nope. I said, thank you, Senator Mansfield. And that was the last time I talked to him. We've had some other personal experiences, but I'm taking up too much time from your questions. I think you may have a better perspective of what you want me to talk about than I do.
Well, one of the things we'd like you to talk about is the fact that over the last few decades, the way we consume news has changed immensely. So what do you see as the most significant change? And is that for better or worse?
Well, every change that I've seen in the news business was preceded by a technology change. Technology had advanced. When I got into the business, we had black and white. There was no Technicolor may have been in the movies in the 50s and even earlier, but not television. Very few women, very few people from minority races, very few African Americans. All of this was changed by technology. And when technology came along, the networks and then the local stations had to change too. But the biggest change has been the internet, the ability for everyone to give their opinions. Well, I'm for the First Amendment. I'm not saying no, only my opinion should count. But when I started in the business, people went into business because it was an occupation, a craft, a profession, call it what you will. They learned the trade. They learned how to find a story. They learned how to check the facts. They learned how to get opinions that differed from someone else's opinion and put them in their story. They learned, in other words, what journalism was all about. And there were only 3 networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. For instance, I was the Watergate correspondent for ABC News. And in the summer of 1962, 72, I got there, 73, got it, okay. The Sam Ervin Committee in the Senate held hearings in which the thing that everyone wanted to know, is the president involved? And John Dean came and said, yes, as a matter of fact, he was. And of course, the White House denied it. And people were riveted to it. But the networks, wanting to make money, didn't want to carry it all day, all 3. So every week, one network carried the hearings and the others made money on the soap operas and all of that. So if you wanted to watch the Watergate hearings, you had to watch me. You didn't have a choice. You didn't have to say, well, this guy, oh, hey, over here, Brokaw, over here, somebody rather. No. Hey, that was a time when I believe in capitalism and I believe in competition, but it was all right that you had to watch me. The point I'm making is not me. The point I'm making is you were trained as a news viewer, whether it was a live event or whether it was something that was in the newspaper by reporters who tried to get the facts straight and give it to you straight. And when we made a mistake, and I made enough of them that I won't tell you the whole log of them, you corrected it. And television was the same way. You had to watch one of the 3 networks. Someone used to say to me, hey, you do the same thing every night. All 3 networks lead with the same story. Yes, all right. When Nikita Khrushchev is deposed as the Soviet leader, everybody leads with it. I mean, sorry about that. Today, the thousands, you say, oh, yeah, I'm exaggerating. No, I'm not. The thousands of websites where people can get their news, cable where people can get their news and opinions, because we were taught to keep our personal opinions, and I've got plenty, and still today, the fire is still brimming, out of the story. If we were doing a straight report, as opposed to being invited on a panel to give an opinion, and it was carefully labeled as such, we kept trying to keep our personal opinions out of it. Today, the people that I see with the websites, that's what they want to do. And the facts, they don't care about the facts. In fact, there's a segment of our population that accept the lies, and if you try to expose the lies, they get very angry and accuse you of being un-American. Certainly one fellow I know, an enemy of the American people. So the biggest change I've experienced is not the color of black and white versus color, or the fact that many, many other people, women, African Americans, Asian Americans, so many people now are in prominent positions, not just, hey, bring me a cup of coffee, please, but in prominent positions. The biggest change has been that people who are ignorant And by ignorant, I'm using a dictionary definition. I'm ignorant of a lot of things, a lot of facts. But if I'm as a reporter working, I try to get my facts straight and give it to you straight to the best of my ability and knowledge. But many people I watch on, sorry to say, cable, as well as just individual websites, they don't care about the facts. And I think it's very injurious to the country, and it's worrisome if we can't solve the problem of people who want to know what's going on and they want it straight, aren't able to find and be led toward the facts that they can get rather than just anybody's opinion. I went on too long, but I get in the Southwest, when a horse gets the bit in its teeth, it runs away because you pull back on the reins, and that's got the bit. So
No, that was excellently said, and it really leads into our next question. There's no doubt democracy and its fragility is on many minds right now, from January 6th to what's happening in Ukraine. And it's hard not to feel like a free press is under assault because of certain news organizations closing and this heightened distrust in the media. So you answered some of that with that question, but I guess the question is, where do we go from here?
Well, I hope we go, water finds its own level. The pendulum always swings, not back to the center, but off to one side and the other. I hope we're in a transition period in which people are sorting through. Would we rather have the facts, or would we rather have what makes us feel good? I mean, if someone comes down the golden staircase and says that Mexico is sending their rapists here, well, who wants that? I don't. Anyone wants it. If you get the idea that that's really what Mexico is doing, because you're not paying attention to the facts that that's not what Mexico is doing, then we're in trouble. And I think we're sorting through this process. We have now about 30 or 35% of the country, I haven't taken a door-to-door sample, but according to the polls, who firmly believe in things which are not factual. They're not true. I'm sorry, but because I say they aren't true, my opinion, no, because they're not true. It's like Newton's first law of gravity. The apple falls down, doesn't fall sideways or ups because someone says it falls sideways or it falls up, it falls down. And I think we're going to make it. I think we're going to make it through. How many elections will it take? How many people will be hurt before we get back to a period where we can go back to the shining city on the hill that Reagan talked about? His last speech when he left office was, if we have to have walls, he said, the walls have to have doors, that everybody who can come to our country and want to become good citizens in the country, obey the laws and work hard, can prosper. That's the country we want back. But we're in danger of losing it if we don't pay attention to what's true and what's not true.
So on a more personal note, what was it like for you to watch the events of January 6th as they were unfolding in that building where you had worked for so many years?
Well, I was not working. I was at home and watching television that day. I guess I got some word that President Trump had a rally. In fact, I saw a portion of the rally, and people were marching to the Capitol. These kind of events, when they occur, and you have no background in saying, yeah, I've seen this before, or I saw that coming because of this, they're shocking. I mean, I thought I knew the country. I didn't know the country. I didn't know there were that many people. I don't mean the 15,000 or so that were in Washington that day, but I'm now talking at the base of 35% of the population that wants that wants to storm our Capitol, that wants to take an election which was clearly won by Joe Biden. 50 judges saw suits from the other side saying it was a fraud. Well, bring us the evidence. No evidence has been presented. You can't say, oh, yes, it was a fraud. And, you know, all the ballots were dumped in the river there in Detroit, or people voted 10 times. All right, show us the evidence. If I accuse you of a crime, I can't get you convicted by saying you're guilty. well, where's the evidence that Gwen is guilty? I'm telling you, they're guilty. That's what's happening in the country. And I think we're going to sift our way through it. When I say people are ignorant, I don't mean they're ignorant in a total sense. A lot of people who haven't got even the kind of the basic education that I got are smart, and they figure things out, and they will figure it out, I think.
Sam, you're no stranger to covering wars with cable news and social media. It seems like we're getting rapid fire news out of Ukraine. It's hard to keep up. I'm wondering if you think this is an improvement from your time covering Vietnam and the first Gulf War, or are there dangers in this instantaneous nature?
I think it has to be an improvement, although you can point to immediate pictures that don't tell the full story. You see what you see. In context, what we used to have to do because we couldn't do anything else. Vietnam, when I was in Vietnam, first of all, I called up New York to do radio broadcasts the same way they did it during the Blitz from London, Edward R. Murrow. Oh, New York, heavy side layer, and is a signal. And we had film, and it had to be transshipped out of Vietnam. And if it's very important, it would be processed in either Bangkok or Hong Kong and put on the satellite. Otherwise, it took 2 days to get on the air. I think it's an improvement that right now we can see things that actually happen. The danger is what we see as a small slice of a picture. And pictures don't lie, you say, but the total picture may not lie, but if you see a small slice. I'm a little concerned about, it was Sherman, General Sherman, who said war is hell. Absolutely, General. Yeah, I know that from Vietnam and from a little bit of the Gulf War. The people in Ukraine have been brutalized. There's no question about it. The horrors that have been inflicted on them, the assaults deliberately to kill civilians, that is a big part of the story, but it is not the only story. The story is, to some extent, the diplomacy. Very little can go on right now because of Vladimir Putin. The desire to arm the Ukrainians with more and more sophisticated weapons. The push from some quarters to actually have the United States get involved on the ground. I think that would be a mistake. But I mean, this is a big part of the story. And whether the Ukrainians can hold out. But night after night, I see another family brutalized in Ukraine. I'm for it. Not the brutalization, but I'm for doing something to stop it if we can. But I got it. I got it already. I don't need more and more as the lead. Tonight I had to watch, I'm not going to say, I want to see what General Austin had to say, and I want to see the question of whether the Russian foreign minister, when he talks about, be careful, World War III, we have the nukes, something that Putin himself brought up, is just trying to bluff people out, or whether this madman in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin, the ex-KGB agent, who used to beat people with a bludgeon at the prison, is now in charge, whether he is going to go over the brink, because he's got lots of problems. He hasn't been able to do, his forces haven't been able to do what they thought they'd do walking into the Ukraine. But worse than that, Xi Jinping, his good friend, wrong. Xi Jinping, who wants to take over the world. China's the menace. If we could get this tapped down, China's the menace from the standpoint, not just the commercialization fight. They're building nuclear submarines every bit as good as ours at the moment. And Xi Jinping has declared that they really want to be the leading country in the world. Now, do you think he wants Putin to succeed and rival him? No. He says, yes, I'm your good friend. Well, I haven't been able to send anything. We're getting it together. And here's Putin. He realizes he's made a terrible mistake from the standpoint of his own prestige. He's got to win this. How far will he go to win it? So I want to hear, as I tune in tonight, I want to hear whether the Russian foreign minister is just doing something about scaring us, trying to scare us with the nukes, and whether this warning is something that must be taken seriously. General Austin Our defense secretary says it must be taken seriously, obviously, but do they mean it? The thought that we could go into a thermonuclear exchange. I was there when Reagan and then Gorbachev both said it is one of their last summits, nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. And we all thought, you're right. How about now?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, following that up on a slightly more cheerful note, we are on a university campus with a terrific journalism school from which Maritsa graduated, as did my own son. Do you have any advice for aspiring journalists? And I want to stress that it was a question put to us also by Barbara from Winnipeg.
Well, yes. I mean, you have to decide you have a passion for this business. A lot of people don't. They have a passion for something else. I used to give graduation talks at various places, and I'd say, many people say to the young people who are graduating, find something you love. I said, no, that's wrong. You might love to be a concert pianist. You might admire it, maybe to someone in your family, and you're willing to work hard, you're willing to study, to be, and you probably would be an okay concert pianist, but that God-given gift that the great concert pianists have, you don't have, but you have others. So find something you're good at. If you're good at something, you'll have an affinity for it. And if you're good at it, you'll love it. And if you're good at it and you love it, the world will, well, you want money, you want fame, you want awards, you'll get them if that's your goal. So I say to young journalists, make certain that you like the business. And that make certain that we have no code. Oh, people come up with codes, but it's one of the lawyers have codes. I mean, you could go to jail as a lawyer if you break certain parts of your code. We don't have that because we believe that all flowers bloom. But the flowers that must bloom are these. Look for the facts in a story. Look for the truth in a story. There is such a thing as truth, not always, because often opinion is labeled as truth. It's not truth, it's someone's opinion. And when you get the facts, check them as thoroughly as you can. If you're on deadline, you've got a problem. If you're writing an opus, something else. And deliver them in a style that, if it's on television or radio, people can understand. And if you write it in a way that's interesting. A man came, Howard K. Smith, who was an icon at CBS News and one of the people I admired when I first came to Washington, told me once, because our CBS bureau was in the same building that my local station was early on. He said, the worst thing you can do is to be boring in television news. When I thought Howard, I was too timid to argue with him. I said, no, the worst thing is to be inaccurate, to be unfactual. What he meant was clearly, if you can't engage the audience in telling them, well, as Don Hewitt, who invented 60 Minutes, the late Don Hewitt, tell me a story. Hey, tell me a story. I mean, don't make it up, but they tell me a story that I'm interested in. So be a journalist who looks for the facts, checks them, writes or speaks from your writing in a way that's understandable and that's interesting. And then come back tomorrow and apologize for a mistake you made and go on.
Great advice. So we have a lot of audience questions pouring in, but we wanted to do some kind of rapid fire questions first, if that's okay.
I will keep my response to 30 minutes apiece. Go ahead.
Perfect. So first question, what was your best day on the job, or at least the most memorable day on the job?
I've had a lot of days that are exciting and good. And I think my best day of the job was early on. And it sounds silly, but until a man named Roone Arledge, who had brought ABC Sports into #1, the only thing the network had that was consistent of #1, took over the news division. We had some good managers, some people I admired, but we were #3. Frank Reynolds, one of our anchormen, used to say that if you get on the FBI 10 most wanted list, best place to hide is to become the anchorman of the ABC Evening News. Thanks, Frank. He's a great man. So this best day I'm telling you about was at the Democratic Convention in 1976 in New York City. Jimmy Carter accepted the nomination of his party to run for the presidency as the Democratic nominee. And around the platform, 3 reporters stood, one from ABC, one from CBS, one from NBC. I was from ABC. And all right, so he finished this, and the people are cheering and you know, happy days. So I just walked, I just said to the control room, I'm going to talk to him. So I just walked up there and started talking to Jimmy Carter, and he answered the questions. The other 2 reporters, no one was keeping them out, but this was not something you did, you know. But I did a lot of things in those days. It was not supposed something you did. But I didn't see any reason why I shouldn't. There's no law against it if he answered the questions. And a man named Roone Arledge, who then became the president of ABC News and brought us to #1. For some time, every one of our news programs was first, from Good Morning America to Nightline at night and what have you, was watching because he was head of sports and he was waiting to get a game of some sort from the West Coast on whenever this convention quit. And the convention wouldn't quit, and we wouldn't quit because who's this guy up there asking all the questions? Well, it turned out to be me. So when it was over, I went back to the place in the grounds where we had, wasn't a tent, but in the quarters. And I opened the door, and there was everybody there, and they were cheering. Now that's a minor little thing. I didn't win any award, but the thought that we beat them, the big boys, CBS and NBC. And then later on, when Roone decided I was a pretty good guy, he didn't know anyone but Peter Jennings, who was in Munich when he, at the Olympics, was doing the broadcasting with his sports team of the murder of all the Israelis. But Peter knew about that. So he knew Peter, he knew me. These breaks, I say to journalism students also, or any students, you need breaks. And everybody gets a break. Be ready when you get a break, be ready to capitalize on it. And by knowing Peter was there going to have a good time. Sports was going to cover the Olympics, but he was ready to tell us about Black September, to tell us about this movement. And I was ready to question Jimmy Carter because I had something to say to him, and he had something to say to me.
So those are the good breaks. What about the other kind? What was your worst day?
Well, I mean, watching the president be shot and not realizing at first that he was shot was not a good day. I mean, it was exciting, but I would rather, I think 2 things made his presidency. Ronald Reagan won decisively over Jimmy Carter, but the polls were clear. The country made up its mind over the weekend. A lot of people didn't want to trust this cowboy, this actor, I mean, who was just anti-communist, who by this time might get us into a war or something. But they thought Jimmy Carter had simply not performed up to par, and he should go home. Nice guy, no one hated him, but we've got to try something else. But Reagan came to the presidency still with not a great, huge majority behind him. He did 2 things. He fired the air traffic controllers who had striking illegally. What? He fires head of all this people who union, he needs the votes? No. And he gets shot. I don't recommend it. He had later said he doesn't recommend it as a way to become popular, but the way he handled himself, his actor training went right in. He was in pain. He almost died if his Secret Service agent, Jerry Parr, had not seen the blood coming up from his mouth, because no one thought at that instant that he'd been hit and the blood was frothy, and Parr knew that was a lung wound and diverted that car to George Washington Memorial Hospital. Emergency on a sleepy Friday afternoon. Can you imagine this police car, this long black limousine drives up and hitched up his pants always, actors, they don't go in public looking slovenly, has tried to walk in by himself, and here's the president who falls over. And then, oh, honey, I forgot the duck. And all in all, I'd rather be in Philadelphia. And I hope all of you are Republicans today, to all his doctors, every one of them was a Democrat, including the doctor who performed the surgery, he was a liberal Democrat. But they said, yes, Mr. President, today we're all Republicans. And my favorite was when he left the hospital. This was typical Ronald Reagan. He comes out after about 10 days, because they didn't want to make him look like he was an invalid. And he's walking down to the car. I was at the hospital, not at the White House, waiting for him. People were waiting. But someone, not me, someone said, Mr. President, what are you going to do when you get back to the White House? He said, sit down. Well, of course. I'm going to sign a bill or two. I'm going to check. No. One of his great secrets was he was comfortable in himself. He didn't put on a lot of airs. He understood the majesty of Hail to the Chief and wearing on his car the banners. For the first 3 weeks, Jimmy Carter wouldn't allow Hail to the Chief to be played for him. He wanted to depomp the presidency. Richard Nixon, all of that. Okay, that's a short answer to that question. What do you got next?
Okay, who do you admire most in journalism?
I'm not going to answer that because I admire so many of the reporters I see and read these days. I admire the op-ed people who take it like it is, but it's opinion. And I admire the journalists who are in the Ukraine. I know when I was in Vietnam, toward the end of the war, people were still being killed. Half the soldiers, our men who would come in on the great big Chinook helicopters to the hospital for wounds of the battle. Half were ODs, heroin. They died on that table from heroin ODs. But these reporters who are there, they're risking their own lives, and that's part of the business. That's what you have to do. You can't, hey, I want all the cream and the marshmallows, but I don't want the bad fudge. No, you take it. It's part of the business. I took my great producer and friend to Sarajevo, told him to stay at the airport. I was riding into town with the then Prime Minister of Yugoslavia, an American citizen, but Milosevic, who was running what was left of Yugoslavia, thought if you get Milan Panic, who had been born in Yugoslavia, but was now an American citizen, a very wealthy pharmaceutical industrialist. So I'm in there, and my producer hitched a ride and was shot to death on the way in. And reporters take that as part of the job when it has to happen. No one seeks it out. I've known a few reporters who wanted to go to every war zone. And I thought, unless American troops or an American interest is involved, hey, that's not your job. Your job is to take care of Americans. I couldn't do it. I'm mad.
Do you miss it?
No, it's a young person's game. It really is. The stamina you have to have, not just in a war zone. I mean, the stamina of deadlines, the stamina of checking stories, the stamina when something, when the Iranians took our embassy in Tehran on the 4th of November, 1979, suddenly it's all leaves canceled. And by leaves, I mean, Ted Koppel at the State Department and I at the White House. We started the day about 6:45. We ended it at midnight. Drove home, got a 2 or 3 hours. It went on for weeks. After 3 days, okay, at my age, I was a beard cat of 50 or something, it was easy. But you have to have the energy. You have to have the ability to remember where your phone is. Where are my keys? And you search the house through and, what's this in my hand? Oh, that looks like my keys. You can't do a job that way. So I don't miss it because I know, I think I could have ridden a horse and not fallen off. In the end, it's a young person's game, and I admire them, almost all of them. I don't admire those who clearly are not seeking the truth, and particularly those who know what the truth is, but we have people on cable today who are taking Vladimir Putin's side. They're not journalists, they're propagandists. Whether they know it or not, they're propagandists for the Russians. And I'm thinking, who are these people? Is it for ratings? Because there is a segment of the audience who will believe them. There's a segment of the audience who think we shouldn't be aiding the Ukraine, and Russia's right, it's in their sphere of influence, and why are we doing this? These are probably also people who don't know that Article 5 of the NATO treaty says that if one member of NATO, there are 30 members now, is attacked, every other member comes to the aid of that person with whatever military might is necessary. I know someone who had great power in this country for a while and said, I don't know why we should do Article 5. What? Okay, enough.
So Sam, we have a lot of audience questions. We'll try to get through some of them. The first one comes from Laura.
For brief, and I do apologize because it's like I want to hear the sound of my own voice. I have these messages and I want to talk, and I'll try to not do so much.
Oh no, it's great to hear your stories and your voice. So Laura from Kalispell wants to know, how do we get back to agreeing or disagreeing, but working with the same set of facts?
I don't know. And it's a great question because I think a lot of us, not just me retired, but a lot of people who are in positions to try to do something. How did we get to a point after World War II? We all had disagreements, and we're one country. We did it, we sacrificed, we did it, and we liked each other. No, some ugly Americans went forward across the world and tried to act like we were big shots when we should have been, as we did, help countries. Look what we did after World War II. We rebuilt our enemies. After World War I, we made Germany easy prey for an Adolf Hitler. Now we put the money. All right, so how do we get back to that halcyon period, or when I covered the Senate? And I watched people disagree, and they didn't call each other names, to a point where just a few years ago, we had a vice president of the United States who used the F word in public on the Senate floor against a senior member of the other party. What's that about? Why do we hate each other? Well, I think now you can figure out some of the reasons. Aristotle was right, and I'm not a Greek. I act as if I'm a great student of philosophy and all that. If the middle class of a country in a democracy is doing well as a middle class, it's not jealous of the rich people, and it's willing to be taxed enough to help the poor people. But if you squeeze the middle class, so they're no longer doing well, they no longer send people to college, they no longer can afford the kind of housing, now they're in trouble and they want to rebel against the system. And these people, we've got to help these people and remember why they got there, because we didn't help them when it mattered. But what are the other people? I don't mean the Nazis, that's a fringe group, but the people who want somehow to change our government. Why? Well, they've been told they want to change, but what is it they're seeking other than a land of opportunity? If you're willing to work hard, you can prosper. And if you're not willing to work hard, you got to not expect the handout every day. I don't know. And I don't know how you change it. You clearly don't change it with the facts. If I watch cable X, because I agree with much of what they say is factual, and someone else watches cable Y and believes what they hear there is factual, but the two are not saying the same thing, how are we going to get back? They will never watch my cable. I will never watch their cable. How do we get to the point where we'll hear each other, say, well, okay, I will give it some thought. Maybe I'll consider, I didn't realize that you say that the statistic says that, the data says this. Who are the people who have no problem with their children being vaccinated against polio, but have a terrible problem about being vaccinated against the COVID-19? Thank God those two vaccines, Moderna and the Pfizer with its BioNTech, saved hundreds, thousands of lives. Who are the people who, well, if they could survive, people do survive with our vaccine. That's true. And A small number of people die from the vaccine. That's also true. But the small number of people that die are dwarfed by the hundreds of thousands of people who live. And I'll take my chances. I'll take those odds anytime. It's political. How did we get to a point where a life-saving vaccine is a political instrument, or a mask, which is uncomfortable? Hell, I don't breathe as well in the past, but I still wear it, even though the mandate's off, because I don't want to be the first person to remove the mask and, whoop, too soon. I'm willing to be the last person. Dummy, you could have removed the mask 3 months ago. Probably could have, but hey, I haven't got it. So I'll just be stupid. I don't know. I filibustered this one too. I wish I had an answer. You can't teach people who don't want to hear someone else's story of what the facts are. If they're not going to listen, I don't know. You're not going to, hey, we have a country, you can't make them. And I'm for that either. Unless public safety is involved, obviously.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you can filibuster this next one because I really hope you have the answer to it. Catherine from Olney, Maryland asked, how do we save local journalism given the rate at which local outlets are being closed by corporate owners? And I'll add, or seeing their resources just slashed.
I don't know either. And because we need local journalism. And I don't mean the days when most cities in moderate sized cities had at least two newspapers, morning and evening. Television ruined that. Everyone, by the time we got the home, they watched all the television, they didn't need two newspapers. But you'd have at least one. The resources are such. When I went to work, that was the same way for ABC. We had bureaus in Paris, we had in London, we had one in Moscow, we had one in Cairo. And I don't think ABC has bureaus over 3 or 4 places now. And newspapers, the good big ones are cutting back because of the bottom line. They are consolidating. Now, we have restraint trade. We have the Justice Department looking into consolidations that break the law, but they can't stop it. The bottom line now rules it all. No mom and pop grocery stores, no ragtag newspapers that do the investigation of small towns and find that the sheriff is corrupt. Thank goodness they're not there anymore. So how do we reverse it? Once again, if there's not a hunger among people for something like that, I don't know how to do it. Look at what's happened now. Twitter and Elon Musk. Oh.
John from Billings wants to know, Sam, knowing what you know about the evolution of media and journalism, would you still find it a profession you would want to go into?
Well, if I were, 20 in my 20s and didn't know what I missed being 88, I think so, because I have to confess, I didn't start out wanting to go into journalism because I wanted to defend the First Amendment. I wanted to help people find facts. There's a picture of me in a Cub Scout uniform at age 8 with a microphone in my hand. I like to talk. Have you noticed? I like to communicate. And I drifted into I'm not going to go the whole story, into the business of communicating and discovering that the news side of communication was something I had a knack for, and I came to love it. The standpoint of enjoying covering stories, when I was a White House correspondent, I don't know how many countries, I haven't added them all up, that I visited. So many of them through the window of a press bus driving into the central city where a tent is set up, and then a hall where the President of the United States speaks, filing the story, getting back on the bus, and getting on the airplane and leaving. So I've also seen countries that I couldn't have seen before and had experiences. There are still Americans in our country today, I can't tell you the number, who were born in this county, lived their life in this county, and died in this county. They have no idea what the world's about. They have no idea how other people worship, what standard of living they have, what their values are different from ours for reasons that to them make sense, but to us seem to be the wrong way. Travel. If your parents who can afford to send your children when they're eligible by age and by education abroad, do the European thing, send them to Africa and send them to the Far East, China, get to know China. I say to young parents, teach your child English, then Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese. Forget all the other languages. Oh, I left the French. But I don't speak French.
So James asks, in the days of three major networks, the truth was relatively easy to discern as the news on the three networks was in agreement. How can a person discern the truth today when there's thousands of places, as you pointed out, to get your news on the internet?
But you can't if you don't have a hunger and an ability and a desire to see other news organizations' views of the same stories. If you're only going to watch one monolithic, hey, watch CNN and nothing else, you're still trapped maybe another different way, but you need a variety. And many people have the ability today to get on the internet, but they don't do it because they're chained to something that they're familiar with. So how are you going to separate the truth from the fiction? Well, young people, particularly if they're not careful, are susceptible. They can find out there was no Holocaust. That was all made up. They can find out those kids in Connecticut, they weren't shot. They were a false flag operation. Well, he's being sued now for every penny is worth. We should have a law that, to me, would require even further punishment for that kind of false information. Hey, you can't fool me. I'm too smart at this age. I've just seen too much. I know they were shot to death. But young people, if they're going to watch these things, and they're free to watch. I mean, one of the big problems to me is censorship versus the First Amendment. We have a certain exceptions to the First Amendment. You can't incite to riot. That's not freedom of speech. You'll be held accountable. If you defame someone, then you have to prove the defamation is false. But if you can do that, you take it for every penny they're worth. There are other exceptions, but mostly our forefathers wanted freedom of expression and speech in the press, and they wanted it for political reasons. They wanted all political thought. Yes, if you want to talk about something else, that's covered. Government shall make no law, but they wanted politics and political views to be able to be expressed. But now they didn't think that the political views they wanted expressed would be lies. They thought everyone would see through the lies, but hey, what should be the tax rate? How much should we tax people? That's an opinion, that's a view. Economists can't agree, or what have you. They wanted to make certain that everybody got to express themselves on those kinds of issues. But they didn't really realize that there would be a body of people who then had the ability, because of the internet, to just lie. And again, the damnable part is it, they know they're lying. They know it. They're lying for a selfish purpose. Maybe money, or it may be a desire to change our government. But whatever their reasons, how do we deal with them? Curtail the First Amendment? Well, that's a slippery slope. What do you think, Gwen, Maritsa? What do you think? What do we do?
I think it's the question of our age, and it's really difficult. Again, having come up through the decades, basically worshiping the First Amendment, but seeing all that's out there, I've always said for years, I will defend to the death the right for someone to be obnoxious. But some of the stuff you see now is demonstrably dangerous.
Voltaire, I will defend your right to say what you said. I disagree with it thoroughly. I'll defend to the death. But I'm not sure I defend to the death, not the lies. I wouldn't defend to death. Maritsa, what do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a really tough thing that's just exacerbated by the internet and a 24-hour news cycle and confirmation bias. And it's a difficult challenge that I think all journalists are up against. But I wanted to ask you before we run out of time, because it must have been deleted accidentally from our questions here, but we wanted to ask about your style of asking questions, because you were known for being a bit feisty sometimes. And I'm wondering how that style came to be.
Well, as I said earlier, I went to 2 or 3 of John Kennedy's press conferences, sat in the back of the room, never had the courage. I didn't even think about it. But beginning with Lyndon Johnson, when I first came to Washington, reporters, particularly prominent reporters, wanted to be social friends with the people they covered, particularly the President of the United States. A man I revere, Ben Bradley, was the great editor of the Washington Post. I'll defend Bradley's tenure in that paper with the highlights right there. But he wanted to be John Kennedy's best friend. They were friends. I did an exit interview with him and said, Ben, did you know that President Kennedy had this affliction of so many different women? Well, he said, I didn't. He looked at me and said, you don't seem to believe me. I said, well, I asked you that question, you got the answer. He said, when I was with the president, it was almost every time was with our wives. And that is not an occasion when the subject of adultery comes up easily or often, but it was a practice line, I let him do it. But I realized that I wasn't alone, but when Lyndon Johnson lies first exposed about the body count in Vietnam, we killed the Viet Cong, the communist locals, 3 times over, and Halberstam of the New York Times, and Neil Sheehan of UPI, and the AP guy whose name is just as important, but at the moment goes revealing all of this. And then Johnson, the facts began otherwise. You begin to realize you don't want to be friends with the people you covered. How could you do that? Your good friend, Senator X, and then all of a sudden he gets in trouble or she gets in trouble, and now you've got to report on it. And maybe you try to keep your friendship out of it, and you have to report something that's injurious to that person. He says, how do you do that? I mean, you can't do that. So I thought what you do is you just ask a pointed question that the public seems to want the answer to. And I've asked many questions that were foolish in the sense that they were wasted questions. But I've asked some that I thought got some answers that people could make up their mind about the president and his views. And the way you do it, you have to be very pointed about it. You don't be rude. His fans will think you're rude simply because you're not blessing the weld and kissing the forelock. But if you don't start out, and I used to go these press conferences early on, that's the dog whining. I used to go to these press conferences and the reporters said, Mr. President, if you don't mind, sir, could you tell us? No. He's there to answer questions, Mr. President. Will you sign the bill next Thursday or not? I mean, and I got to do that, and it worked more and more. I got answers. Other reporters got answers. By the time I became the White House correspondent with Jimmy Carter, and Nixon had also demonstrated that we couldn't trust a president, lied, committed crimes for which ordinary people will go to jail every week. He was pardoned, of course, and was not subject to criminal prosecution. That you do your job by asking pertinent questions and getting I'll tell you the worst question I ever asked. And it's interesting. I thought I was going to get a huge amount of, what do you want? He says, I want dinner. What are you doing? Just a moment, chap. The worst question I ever asked, it's on the record, was Bill Clinton. He had been acquitted by the United States Senate on his impeachment. But story had come up, national story. NBC had done a big story on it. The newspapers were filled with it, and held a news conference. I said, when he called him, Mr. President, Juanita Broaddrick claims that you raped her. If that is not true, sir, what association, if any, did you have with Ms. Broadwick? He said, and I'm paraphrasing now, you can find it in the record, well, I've said to the American people, I'm going to spend every day of what's remaining my presidency working for them. I'm not going to continue to ask the questions that have now been settled. My lawyer has issued a statement on that. Well, his lawyer, Mr. Kendall, has not been accused of rape. So what Mr. Kendall had to say did not seem to me to be pertinent. As he turned away, I said, can't you just deny it, sir? See my lawyer. Well, the audience can make up its mind about whether it's satisfied with his answers. I thought the question was pertinent, but I hated to ask that question for the obvious reasons. But I think I never had to put up with what these reporters put up with Donald J. Trump, President Trump. I never had to put up with that. Some presidents may have wanted me fired. Some presidents may have thought I should be fired. No one ever said that in public. They may have said it to their spouses or their chiefs of staff or something. And no one ever tried to tell me I couldn't ask a question or not to ask a question. No one tried to take my pass away from me at the White House. Civility on both sides. We reporters understood what the president's job was, and our job was to different. We were not president. And to ask questions and get the person to reveal plans, reveal his actions, why we had done things his critics complained about. And I think that today, not because of me, but I think that is the rule, as you see, particularly after Mr. Trump's presidency. But press secretaries didn't lie. Ron Ziegler lied. Jody Powell, Carter's press secretary, lied one time that I know of. Jack Nelson, a great deceased reporter now for the Los Angeles Times, got wind of the fact that there was some rescue raid being planned to the hostages in Iran. And he went to Powell and he said, I've got a source which says that you're planning, and Powell said, it's not true. What's he about to say? No comment. Oh, reporters, you answer my question, no comment. I got the story. And Jack Nelson believed him. And I think Powell was right to do it. And Larry Speaks, who was President Reagan's press secretary for a time, same thing happened, but different. Bill Platt, great friend of mine, who was a great CBS News television correspondent, my rival during the day and my drinking buddy in the evening, got wind, with others, that some was laughing about Grenada. And he went to Speaks, and Speaks genuinely didn't know anything about it. I don't know what you're talking about. And Speaks went to Admiral Poindexter, who was the national security advisor. And Poindexter said, tell him that's preposterous. Of course, it was true. So Speaks went back and said, it's preposterous that we're going to invade Grenada. But Plant, the kind of guy he is, when it's all said and done, said Speaks didn't know he was lying. Speaks had been lied to. And sure enough, it was. Speaks, once again, was in a difficult problem. One day we noticed that there was a bandage on President Reagan's nose. Hey, what's in the president's nose? And Speaks was kind of prepared. He said, oh, there was a blemish there and it was tested for bacteria and there was no bacteria, which was true. What it was the least injurious form of cancer. But mother, I like Mrs. Reagan, after the president's cancer operation, or his bowel operation, was deadly afraid of having the public think he had cancer. And she ordered Speaks not to reveal that he had cancer. So Speaks withheld the truth. We didn't say, has he got cancer? And he said, no. We said, what's the bandage for? Oh, well, the bacteria. But today, we saw press secretaries, not the present one who's leaving. It's one of the best I've ever seen for President Biden. But we've seen press secretaries who just knowingly lie in behalf of their boss. Mike McCurry wouldn't do it. Mike McCurry was press secretary to Bill Clinton. I was back at the White House, shouldn't have been because I'd done it. Seldom acts, second acts of American life, but my boss said do it, so oh yes sir. We were high, I don't remember the subject, but during the Monica thing, before he confessed, he's still saying that it wasn't true. And whatever the subject was, said, what about this? And McCurry said, I don't know. Well, go ask the president, he knows. I'm not going to do it. Well, what do you mean? You're the press secretary, we can't see him. Why aren't you going to ask the president? And this is on the record also. McCurry said to us, because I don't want to lie to you. Well, if I were the president, I'd have fired him on the spot because then that wouldn't have been very wise either. But
Well, Sam, we are over time, but we've enjoyed every minute of it. And thank you so much for joining us tonight.
the audience has been leaving, but they're all gone. The three of you, including Randy, who's been signing for us, you're still caught. I've enjoyed it very much. And I appreciate the invitation to appear.
We loved having you, and we want to also extend our thanks to the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center for hosting this conversation.
But we could not offer programs like this evening's dialogue without the generous support of our funders and supporters. If you would like to help us continue fostering ethical public policy and leadership, please visit the Mansfield Center website and click on Donate to make a gift.
And
To me, I have the checks in the mail.
oh, all right. Thank you, Sam. And we don't want you to miss our next Mansfield. Well, that's for everybody. That's for everybody on the call. Don't miss our next Mansfield Center event. It's commemorating the 50th anniversary of Mike Mansfield's visit to China with two preeminent experts in the field.
That will be on May 3rd. It's called Rethinking China, Shifting Global Goals and Ambitions, featuring Elizabeth Economy of the U.S. Department of Commerce and Ling Wei, Chief China Correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Thank you, everyone who joined us tonight.
Thank you.
I didn't even get to tell my Mansfield telephone story on the day John Kennedy was killed.
Oh, what a tease.